So how would you like 2 extra hours every single week? Today I'm gonna talk about 3 key issues mobile developers face and how you can solve them using Fastlane. So as mentioned before, Fastlane is a set of open source command line tools that help you automate all aspects of testing and deploying your application. Fastlane includes 9 separate tools to automate tedious tasks like creating screenshots, provisioning profiles, and building and signing your application. Fastlane itself is a tool that connects all these other tools into one workflow. So we don't have time to go into detail to each of these tools. So I will instead focus on 3 key issues you've probably experienced in the past and how you can solve them using Fastlane. So first I will talk about generating beautiful localized screenshots on different devices. Next up, our favorite topic, code signing. And finally, how you can automate your whole deployment process. So every time you publish a new application, you have to generate screenshots. You have to generate new screenshots every time you add a new language, every time you change the design, or every time Apple announces a new device, like the iPad Pro just recently. So it is really hard to do screenshots right. And to give you an idea, if you support 10 languages for 5 device types with each 5 screenshots, you end up with 250 screenshots you have to first generate and then upload to iTunes Connect. And yeah, this is already outdated. We now have 300 screenshots because of the iPad Pro. So good thing there's a tool called Snapshot. Snapshot uses UI testing, which was recently announced by Apple. So you provide a UI test automation file to tell Snapshot how to navigate in your app and where to take the screenshots. Snapshot will take care of automatically switching the language and the device type for you. So how does this all look in action? Can you see the video? Perfect. So once you set up Snapshot, you just run Snapshot in the command line. You don't have to specify anything. And Snapshot will detect your project settings and the simulators, so you don't have to think about it. The great thing about all this is that it all runs in the background, so you can do something else while Snapshot generates the screenshots for you. And once everything is done, you can upload the screenshots to iTunes Connect using a tool called Deliver. So in the end, you get this nice HTML-based summary, which you can see here, so you can quickly get an overview of how your app looks like on different devices and different languages. It's extremely useful if you change the design of the application or add a new language to quickly get a feel of how the app looks in different languages. Just think about German, where the cancel button is like half the screen. Okay, but now to our favorite topic, code signing and provisioning profiles. So, raise your hand. Who of you saw this dialog before? Pretty much everyone in the room. So the thing with it is that it doesn't always work. And sometimes it's also destructive. So it might revoke certificates and provisioning profiles. So the question is, how can we do this right? How can we properly code sign our application without being destructive? And also do all this from the command line, so we can easily run it on a CI server or any remote machine. So first thing we need to sign our application is we need a valid code signing identity, certificate, and private key. These 3 things belong together. So we can use a tool called cert to do that. We just run cert and it will check if we have a valid code signing identity, and if that's not the case, it will request one. SCI. As the name already tells, it deals with provisioning profiles. So SCI will use the certificate we previously generated and will generate a provisioning profile that matches the certificate. Once this is done, we can use a tool called Gym to build and sign our application. So we will end up with a signed IPA file ready to be uploaded to iTunes Connect or any beta testing service. So how does this look like when we run it in the terminal? Well, we just run these 3 commands. Of course, there are more options available, but usually the defaults are pretty good. But these 3 commands, they look like a lot of work, right? So how can we automate this? That brings us to our next topic, automatic deployment, automating a deployment process using Fastlane. So the following use case, your boss or your project manager asks you for the latest version of your app on their phone to show it to the client. So you would then go ahead and do all these things. You increment the version number, you commit and push the version bump, you have to make sure you have a valid provisioning profile, build and sign the application, upload it to some beta testing service. In case of Testflight, you wait a few hours, add some release notes, and finally distribute it to your testers to install it on the actual device. So what if we could automate all this and reduce it to a push of a button? Well, with Fastlane you can. So Fastlane uses a so-called fast file, which contains all information needed to deploy your application. It is based on Ruby. It is a Ruby DSL, similar to what CocoaHeads does with the pod file. This allows a very dynamic configuration for more advanced setups. So you just define the steps that are necessary to deploy your application, and it will make sure to run each of the steps. If one of the steps fail, the Fastlane will stop executing them. So how does the example look like for our example to upload something to a beta testing service? So first of all, we define a beta lane. We can define any number of lanes and any lanes we want. So we have, for example, a release lane, a beta lane, or just a test lane. So the first three actions basically increment the version number, commit the version bump, and finally push that to a Git remote like GitHub. Next up, we run cert, sci, and gym. And you already know that combination. It makes sure that we have valid code signing identity, provisioning profile, and build our application. And finally, we upload this to Crashlytics beta, for example, and then post a message to Slack that the new build is ready. So the great thing about Fastlane is that it comes with so many built-in integrations like HipChat, Slack, and so many more. So no matter what tools you're already using, Fastlane has you covered. So you can easily replace one of these actions with something else. So if you want to switch from Crashlytics to Hockey, you just replace this one action. That's it. And if an integration is not available yet, you can easily extend Fastlane to fit your needs. So if you look at the overall configuration file, how does the Crashlytics action know where to find the API file? How does the gym action know what provisioning profile to use? So these are all things Fastlane does for you, so you don't have to think about it. It will pass on information from one build step to the next ones. So you end up with this very clean and lightweight configuration file. So you finished writing this fast file. How can you actually run it? You just run Fastlane beta. And to see everything in action, let's say we want to release our app in the App Store. We defined a different lane, which is Fastlane iOS release, and it will first build our application using gym. As you can see, all the Fastlane tools print out this nice little table of summary, so you can see what options you passed and what values it is actually using. And once building with gym is done, it will go ahead and use a tool called Pilot to upload the build to iTunes Connect. So for uploading the binary, Fastlane is using the iTunes transporter, which is built into Xcode. In the end, you get, again, a summary of how long the build actually took, so you can quickly see what's taking up all the time. And this is the summary table you get, and additionally, Fastlane prints out every command it is actually executing. This is super important. All these tools are very transparent, and you can always see what's going on and what commands are actually being executed. So, since we have a little bit more time today, I will quickly go over the individual tools and what they do, so you have an overview of what you can actually automate. First off is Deliver. So Deliver is a bridge between the local computer and iTunes Connect. So it allows you to upload app metadata, screenshots, and binaries to iTunes Connect, and even submit an app for review. Snapshot, we already talked about, generating localized screenshots. Frame.it allows you to add device frames around your screenshots. You can even add a custom title above it and a custom background. With PAM, you will never have to Google how to generate a push notification profile again. So if you Google for that, you will end up on these pages with 100 steps, and you copy and paste some commands and drag and drop in the keychain. With PAM, you just specify the app and the environment, and that's it. Sci, you already know, dealing with provisioning profiles. Cert, code signing identities. And Produce is a tool that is useful for apps with dozens of for companies with dozens of apps, so you can create new apps on iTunes Connect and the App Developer Portal from the command line. Trim is for building and signing your application, and Scan is a brand new tool to test your application. So this is very useful on a CI server. So many of these tools interact with Apple in some way. So I developed this tool called Spaceship, and this is the Apple headquarters. And so Spaceship is responsible for communicating with Apple. It is one central space for all the communication. There are 3 different API endpoints: iTunes Connect, the Apple Developer Portal, and the Xcode API. And Spaceship is an abstraction of all these 3 APIs and provides a unified Ruby interface. The nice thing is that this can be used by anyone. So you don't have to use Fastlane, but you can just use Spaceship to automate your own task for your own company. So I was building some smaller tools just to demonstrate of what you can build with Spaceship in a very short amount of time. This is, by the way, is a Ruby library. It is a Ruby gem. So boarding is a nice little tool that allows you to onboard new testers to your Testflight app. So if you use Testflight, you would usually go ahead and go to iTunes Connect and add each email address to the website. With boarding, you can generate this nice little page you can send to your potential testers, and they can enroll themselves. So this is a tool I built under a day using Spaceship. The second thing is watch build. So when you upload a build to iTunes Connect or to Testflight, you have this processing time, which might take from 10 minutes to a few hours. And sometimes you forget to refresh the page. And so you can just run watch build, and it will refresh this page for you in the background using Spaceship. And you get a nice little notification when it's done. Spaceship, by the way, doesn't use any browser. It is a pure HTTP client. So it is really, really fast and has a test coverage of like 98%. This is a new tool I released last week. So it's called Fix Code, and it replaces the Fix Issue button with emojis. And it sounds funny, but it's actually very serious. So a lot of big companies already told me that they want to roll it out to all employees, because then you cannot revoke any certificates. This is especially important if you are in enterprise environment, because you can break apps that are installed on actual devices as soon as a certificate gets revoked. So this is actually really useful, and there is a Fastlane action that lets you automatically install this plugin whenever you run Fastlane, so you have it across your whole team, if they want it or not. I quickly wanted to mention this as well. A lot of people ask me what terminal I'm using. You're going to see it in action afterwards. It's very simple, actually. And so I set up this repo. What terminal is Felix using? And it has like 100 stars already. So you can check it out if you're interested. Very easy to set up. And yeah, this was like a very short introduction of what you can do with Fastlane and how it helps you save time. I also prepared a live demo. So let's see if that works, because it does require internet connection. So yeah, let's hope that works. Oops. Can you all read that, or should it be bigger? It's okay? Yeah. So just showing you run Fastlane would be boring, because you already saw that in the presentation, right? So instead, we're having a basically empty project, and we're going to set up Fastlane for this project. So if we take a look at this app, it's really just basically some dummy view controllers and some UI tests there. And there is no Fastlane setup for this project yet. So once you set up Fastlane, you would have a Fastlane folder containing all the configuration files. In general, with Fastlane, all configuration files are stored on the file system in the Git repo. This is super important. So if you check out the project, you immediately have all the configuration there, and it's not stored somewhere on Jenkins configs. So we're gonna run Fastlane init, which is basically the assistant that helps you get started really fast. There's some text here. You don't need to read all this because I'm gonna explain it to you anyway. Basically, it's warning me that I want to commit everything beforehand. And in the beginning, it asks for some very basic metadata. So this is, I will be asked this only one time, and it will be stored in a configuration file. About the Apple ID, only the Apple ID, the email address itself, is stored on the file system. The password is stored securely in the keychain. I'm not going to get asked for the password because it's already in my keychain. So it is asking us if we want to use deliver to upload app metadata. And yes, we do want to do that. So it is going to log in on iTunes Connect and download the existing metadata and screenshots and stores all that locally. So this is super useful. We suddenly have the metadata of iTunes Connect in Git. So we can do really cool things with that. We can submit pull requests for that. We have a history of our metadata. So let's see what it actually created for us. We now have a Fastlane directory. Is this big enough on the Finder? Can you all read that? Okay. So we have a Fastlane directory, and there are two new files we got. So let's take a look at the app file first. The app file basically contains the two information we provided, the app identifier and our Apple ID. The rest is like advanced options if you have multiple teams, for example. Then we have two new folders. The metadata folder, containing all the general metadata, like the copyright notice. And then we have the actual localized app metadata, description, keywords, all these things. So we have that all in Git now. Additionally, we have a screenshots folder with our existing screenshots. So this is a dummy app, that's why there are only 5 screenshots. Okay, it's asking us if we want to set up Snapshot. We don't want to do that right now. And if we want to use Sci, of course. And then it's asking us for the scheme. So again, we have, I think it's example. And finally, last step, it's asking us to enable crash reporting. So if you set up Fastlane, I recommend doing that. It makes it much easier for me to help you in case you run into troubles. Cool. So we actually got one more file now, which is the fast file. If we take a look at this, there's a lot of comments there. We don't care about them right now, but it's very useful because you can actually set up Fastlane without looking up the documentation, because the documentation is right there in the file. So we're going to focus on beta distribution, since we want to upload a new build now. So I'm going to remove the rest to focus on the important things.
Can you make the font bigger here?
Yeah, sure. Is that good? So, no, this doesn't big. We first run Sci, and then we run Trim to build our app. So let's just see if that works. We don't change anything else. So we can now run Fastlane, and then the lane name, which is beta. Let's try that. Again, we get the summary of what it is doing. So we don't have ad hoc. We don't want to skip install. We just use the defaults. We didn't specify anything, right? So it's very easy. And yeah, again, we see the command executing. It's using Trim to build our app. This is the command you would have to use if you don't use Trim. And this, and this. All these things you would have to do manually. And yeah, here we go. So Sci took 9 seconds to run, Trim took 5 seconds to run, and that's it. So let's see if we have an IPA file here. Here we go. We have a simple location file, which we can upload to Hockey, Crashlytics, or whatever service. And we have an IPA file. And if we take a look at this, it is actually signed properly. So it's expired in 364 days. This is a plugin, provisioning quick load plugin, which is very useful. I can really recommend to install it. It's linked on Sci, on the Sci repo. And wait, that's not it. Yeah, and one more thing I want to show you is how to get up and running with Snapshot. So Snapshot is really useful. It's going to save you so much time. So to set up Snapshot, you would just run Snapshot init. And again, it would detect all these things automatically. Also, the Fastlane setup automatically detected if you use CocoaPods, if you use Cartridge. So it will customize the configuration file based on information it can find. So the assistant basically cannot do everything, but it will tell me what to do. This is also important. It should be transparent. It shouldn't modify your project file without you knowing it. So basically we have to move the helper over to our project. So let's do that. Inside the Fastlane folder, we have a new helper file, which is needed for Snapshot to change the language. We drag it to the UI testing target. So next up, we have to add these 3 lines to our actual snapshot script. Again, this is needed to change the language and also to actually generate the screenshots. This is already prepared. So you can see the actual code to navigate in the app is just take a screenshot after the launch and then change orientation to landscape and tap a button. So it's really straightforward. And yeah, we did that already. But it also created one other file, which is a snap file. So you can see we have a lot of configuration files here. You don't necessarily have to have them. You can just delete them. But it is a good practice to have one configuration file for each of the tools, for the more complex tools, because it helps you to clearly separate these tools. And it also allows you to run Snapshot directly from here. You don't have to call it from Fastlane. So let's take a look at the snap file. Basically, we can specify the devices we want to run it at. And since we don't want to wait for a few hours, we will just have like 2 devices and 1 language. But you can imagine how it looks like for more languages. And yeah, we can now just run Snapshot. It detected that the example that we have multiple schemes, so we can just specify 2. And here we go. We can look at the summary again. 1 language, 2 devices. So actually the simulator is already launched in the background. Here we go. Even if it's cut, that's not an issue. Like the screenshots themselves are full resolution. So you see it's tapping, it's changing the landscape, it's doing all that. And the best thing, it does all that in the background. I can open up Xcode, I can open up something else, and Snapshot is still working. And one nice little thing is, it's now going to switch to the iPhone 6s. So usually you want to have the screenshots like really nice, no loading indicators, and you want all the images to be fully loaded. And sometimes that's with network requests, and it's really hard to get that right. So by default, Snapshot will wait for the loading indicator top there to disappear. And now it's actually going to navigate to the second tab. It's a bit hard to see because the iPhone 6 Plus is huge, but basically it's waiting for the loading indicator to disappear. So if your app uses this loading indicator, you end up with really nice screenshots. And yeah, once this is all done, it opens up the summary you saw in the video before. So we just have the 2 languages, right? 2 devices, sorry. And you can just click on them to get like a good overview of how they look. That's all for the demo and for the presentation. Thank you.